And welcome, everybody, to another edition of First and 10. I'm your host, Keith Harrington, here on NYVT Media Sports. And later on, we're going to have an interview with a local high school football coaching legend, Coach Mike Macura, who is now back on the coaching staff at Granville-Whitehall, will be joining us on the show a little bit later on. We look very much forward to that interview. But first of all, let's look back at last week's games. And we were on the road at Ravenna-Queens-Selkirk as Ravenna-Queens-Selkirk took on Averill Park, our first trip over to RCS. And what a great game we were treated to. And that game was streamed live, as I said, here on NYVT Media Sports. And RCS came in having won 3 out of the last 4 Section 2 Class B titles. Averill Park, the defending Class A champion, but this year they've moved down to Class B. So that set up for a great early season matchup between two of the top teams in Section 2. And they did not disappoint. They put on a great show for us right down to the wire, a 14-13 win for RCS. Averill Park took a 7-0 lead, a 10-yard touchdown run from Philemon Noy, put them on top 7-0 after the extra point kick. RCS came back in the second quarter, a 56-yard touchdown scamper by their quarterback Mason Karkner on a quarterback keeper. The extra point was good, and that tied that game at 7 apiece. Averill Park took the lead on the final play of the first half. 2 seconds left, a 25-yard Hail Mary pass from Mason Sansone to Tyler Bradley. Bradley is usually the quarterback. He stands about 6'4", and he's a big target. They moved him to wide out, brought Sansone in at quarterback. Sansone threw it up for grabs at the goal line, and the big 6'4" Bradley went up and got it. The PAT, though, was wide to the right, and that left it 13-7 Averill Park at halftime. RCS came out and grabbed the lead on a 16-yard touchdown pass from Kartner to JT Foy, and that was late in the game. That was in the fourth quarter with 4:55 to go. The teams had just gone back and forth, exchanging drives that were ended by the defense or punts or whatever the case may be until that drive. And that touchdown pass was a beautiful corner post pattern, a post corner pattern, I should say, as Kartner threw a perfectly thrown ball to Foy. And the extra point kick was good, and that gave the Ravens the 14-13 lead. But Averill Park was not done. They converted a big fourth down in RCS territory. They moved down inside the red zone, but then the RCS defense came up big. Tyler Haslam knocked down a potential scoring pass in the end zone, and then the Ravens ended up recovering a fumble, and that sealed the deal as it was Ravenna 14, Averill Park 13 in our game of the week last week. And RCS is now 2-0. Averill Park is 1-1. And our player of the game, our Lake Champlain Coal Company player of the game, was Tyler Haslam. He was all over the place defensively, in on tackle after tackle. It seemed like I was constantly calling Haslam's name, and then he made that big play at the end, batting down what would have been the winning touchdown potentially for Averill Park, and really saved the day on that play before the Averill Park fumble. So a really big play there, and congratulations to Tyler Haslam. Granville-Whitehall fell at Fonda Fultonville. That game was a barn burner. 35-30, the Valley Hawks coming away with the win. CJ Monty, though, for GW, scored 5 touchdowns, rushed for 214 yards on 35 carries. Brandon Beaver also ran for 62 yards for GW. The Valley Hawks, Fonda Fultonville, now 2-0 on the season. Granville-Whitehall falls to 1-1. Quarterback Ryan Ingmer rushed for 161 yards and 3 touchdowns and passed for 2 more as Greenwich defeated Kenajahari Fort Plain, and they moved to 2-0 on the season. And it was Ingber running 10 times. He had scores of 5, 7, and 53 yards. He also completed 6 of 9 passes for 69 yards, 2 touchdown passes, 1 to Ethan Mullen and 1 to Wyatt Jameson. And Greenwich, not only are they 2-0, they're unbeaten, unscored upon, as they also shut out Mariah the week before. And they jumped out to a 34-0 lead in that game and never looked back. They also got a pair of touchdown runs from Will Weber, who had 52 yards. So Greenwich looks like, even though they lost some key players to graduation, they are picking up right where they left off. In other scores around the area involving teams from our coverage area here on NYVT Media Sports, it was Cobleskill Richmondville moving to 2-0 as they defeated Mechanicville, and score of that game was 20-0. It was Coxsackie Athens falling to Norwich 53-14. It was Ichabod Crane playing Glens Falls, the Black Bears defeating the Riders in that one by a score of 54-14. Hoosick Falls Tamarack over Hudson by a score of 30-6. And an 8-man football, it was Corinth in their debut. Corinth Hadley Luzerne, their debut of 8-man football, and they defeated On Tech of Syracuse by a score of 24-16. The Fairhaven Slaters, they were defeated in a close game in their game last week up at Linden Institute, and Poultney also fell last week at home against the Wasps of Woodstock. That was last week's games. Coming up, we're going to talk to local legendary football coach Mike Macura, and we'll do that right after this on First Down and 10 here on NYVT Media Sports. And welcome back to First and 10. I'm your host, Keith Harrington, and right now it's our guest segment of the show. And we are very pleased and honored to have with us today Mike Macura, longtime football coach at Granville, an athletic director and teacher, and has coached just about everywhere there is to coach, probably as well known a football coach in this area as you can possibly come up with. And Mike, thanks for taking the time out to
You're welcome. It's a
come
pleasure
join
to be
us.
here.
So let's start, not to put you on the spot, but talk about all the places you've coached over the years
Well,
at Granville here.
we'll put it this way. I've been around. I started here in Granville, and I was a teacher here and administrator as such, athletic director, football coach, and other coaches for 37 years. And I coached football here for 34. After which, when I was still working in Granville, I left the football coaching ranks here, and I moved on to Castleton College, and now it's Castleton University, or I'm not sure what they call it, Vermont
Vermont
slash
State
State
University,
University
Castleton, yeah.
Castleton. I was there for 10 years, and that was a great experience. We started the program from scratch, and the 0 year was 2008, and then we started playing in 2009. And then after that, I left Castleton and moved on to Glens Falls High School and coached there for 5 years with Pat Lilac, who that was a great experience there. And we had a state championship team in 2018. And then after that, I joined the Warrensburg Lake George coaching staff, where Mike Perrone was a former head coach there, and was with them for 2 years. That was another excellent experience with coaching with Mike. He was a young man that went to Castleton, and I was fortunate to be able to recruit him from Warrensburg, and he went to Castleton and played there for 4 years, and then he was a student assistant afterwards, and I was his position coach while he was there. So that's where I've been, and now here I am back in Granville-Whitehall, and again, it's been a pleasure to be allowed to join this staff with Kevin Gibo and all the other coaches here.
So I could, it doesn't sound like you've ever really retired.
No, I have not retired. You can say in namesake that you're retired, but no, I have not retired yet.
So I actually just retired after 32 years in education myself. So I need a little advice, about retirement, I guess, because here I am with NYVT Media. So I guess I
Yeah.
never retired. But how do you keep track of what day it is? I mean,
You just keep going and figure it out. Okay, here we are again. You got to get ready for practice. You got to get ready for your next opponent, and it's just a constant turnover from week to week,
Yeah.
and you're always getting ready for something and
Yeah.
getting ready for the season. And it's been a great pleasure to be able to coach the number of years I have. I've come in contact with some great people, great young men. And I always refer to them, that kid or this kid, but they're young men now. And right now, I'm coaching young men here that coach their fathers and possibly even their grandfathers.
Right.
So it's been a long duration of coaching career, which I absolutely have enjoyed.
The reason I ask is because now that I'm retired from education, I get up in the morning, I don't know what day it is. And a buddy of mine, the best advice a buddy of mine who's also retired gave me is every day is Saturday. Just think of it as every day is
Right.
Saturday.
Yeah, and you just keep right on going with it. So, yeah.
Um, so I mean, you've seen a lot, obviously, over the years as far as football goes. How has the game changed over the duration of your career?
Well, I see back when I first broke in here coaching on the varsity football level back in 1980. I'd coached here previously in a modified level, and Ken Birch and myself, we took over the team in 1980, and we had a real solid team there, and 7-1-1 that year, and that was again a great experience working with Coach Birch, and over the time, I can say probably. The speed of the game has changed, and the offenses are more wide open
Mm,
because you get more of a spread attack. But then again, you're going to get some teams that come back in and they're going to run more of a condensed look with a double wing, or you're going to get the flex bone like Schuylerville runs, those kind of offense. But I have to say the game has changed a little bit more because the speed of play
right.
is quite a bit, and your defensive have to be more aware of what can be presented to them, and you got to be ready for anything and everything because teams one week can come out in a different look, and all of a sudden, here we go. They came out with something different. When we had played Cambridge over the years, when I was at Warrensburg, Lake George, you could expect anything and everything,
Right.
from a well-coached team, from Doug Luke, and that's what it was. You just didn't know what to expect, so you really had to be ready for everything. But generally speaking, it's the speed of the game,
Right, exactly.
quite a bit.
So you talked about coaching at what is now Vermont State University, Castleton, and I know you've got some possible college prospects on this Granville-Whitehall team this year. I know CJ Monty has been contacted by some schools, including U-Albany. What does it take? What's the difference at the college level? What's it take these guys to get to the college level and play?
Again, it's going to be, as from what I've seen from the high school transitioning to the collegiate level, again, is the speed of play
Hmm.
and the fast-paced part of the game. Coaching high school football for 34 years, and then myself going and coaching at Castleton, and that was again, it was how fast the game was, and and you had to catch up yourself as a coach, and with that, you just constantly be prepared. It was the preparation that was so important. So that transfers also to the young men that want to move on to the next level. They're going to have to understand that they're going to have to work extremely hard. And they're going to have to work smart and develop their bodies because they're going to be going against some higher caliber players, of which are going to be at their same level or better. So I would have to say development of strength, develop a very, very good work habit, be extremely organized because you're going to have to manage your time management with going to school, going to practice, and you never know when you practice. At times when I was at Castleton, we practiced from 5:30 in the morning to 7:30 in the morning, and then we would end up practicing from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. or 11:30. And it is time management,
Right,
organization,
right.
and again, speed of play is that.
Back when you were athletic director here and teaching here, could you have ever imagined with the rivalry that Granville and Whitehall had back then that you'd be merged right now and be playing together?
If someone had told me that back in 1980 when we took the field here, walking out here on Eppolito Field in front of probably 5 or 6 thousand people, and you try to tell that to the young men today, say we played in front of a crowd of 5 or 6 thousand
Yeah.
people, they're going to look at you, really? And I said, yes, that's the way it was, and the rivalry was intense. And to go revert back to that, they really don't have not ever experienced. Their fathers may have,
Right, right.
and or other members of their family, but actually themselves, no, it was not that way. Now, and as the time went on, the rivalry was intense in 80 and 81. I can remember like it was yesterday playing them here. We hadn't beaten them since 1968, and early in the game, Eric Scribner blocks a punt, and we were up 7-0 on them. And then as the game wore on, we scored again, and then Jamie Panusha kicks a field goal. We're up 17-0, and then early in the third quarter, we had to make a stop around midfield, and the stop turned the complexion of the game around, and it's 17-0, and we broke we'll call the losing streak from
Right,
68 on.
right.
And then after that, the next year at Whitehall, in a real wet, windy game, I think we emerged victorious that day. I think it was 27-0. Again, the 81 team, they were exceptionally good, 8-1, hard-nosed kids. again, young men as they are today. So it's been an intense rivalry, but as time went on, when it became classification play,
Right.
which myself and former coach John Millette and former coach at Lake George, Tim Donnelly, ourselves, we were adamantly against that. And because you took away from your rivals, you took away from playing teams in your own backyard,
Mm.
and you're starting to go and play games. We were on the bus 2.5 hours to Fonda
Right.
last week.
Right.
And, of course, there's a crowd, there's a following that goes there too. However, you lose that contact. But again, the way the game of football is with what merges and this kids not as playing like they used to,
Right.
the team sizes aren't the way they used to be. So that changed it in the classification play. Granville being a C and Wild being a D, we didn't play them,
Right.
and that was where that separation went.
I remember when it was Granville-Whitehall week, it's all you had to do is drive through one of the towns, and you
Right.
knew that the businesses had signs
Exactly.
written
Yep.
on the glass of their businesses, and it was just amazing.
It was parades, it was bonfires, and then you'd have somebody going to try to paint the other opponent's goalposts or paint their letters on the field and things like that. It was a rivalry, and again afterwards, rivals become friends, and as
Right.
they present it here now, it's one. It's Granville and Whitehall is one team, and it's looked upon that way. The kids are great. I mean, they get along well with each other, and you really don't see the separation at all as being a Granville or a Whitehall. It's one team,
Right.
and that's the way it's approached.
So, talking about this year's team, you got Broad Perth tomorrow night. You come in here with a 1-1 record, tough loss down at Fonda. Looks like maybe some extra point conversions would have been huge in that game. But
Yeah,
where do you think this year's team is at?
well, again, it's too early to tell. We played a pretty solid opponent in Plattsburgh week one, and we really did very well our first contest, and defensively did well. They moved the ball, but we made some mistakes. We worked on that during the week to try to fix those things. But then, as we went to Fondo, uh, the first 10 minutes of the game, it was that we weren't ready to play.
Mhm.
Long bus trip, hurried pregame, hurried get on the field and go. They came right out and stopped us on a 3-and-out, and we punt, and they drive right down the field and score again. Another 3-and-out. Bang, and they come down and score. It's 14-0, and all of a sudden, 10-minute mark in the first quarter, we get a first down.
Mhm.
And it was like there was some enthusiasm got
Right. Right.
put into the offensive group, and at that point on, we started to take control of the game,
Right.
and it went 14-6, and then we got another one because we got to stop, and then I was 14-12. We're knocking at the door, but we needed to have that key stop in the
Mhm.
third quarter, which we didn't quite get, but we had an opportunity on a special teams play with a kickoff that was popped into the air, and again, I'll take responsibility for that. We're not coaching that phase of the game to say, okay, that ball hits the ground, it's a live ball.
Right.
It's ours. It's anybody's. It was right in our hands. It would have gave us 1st and 10 at the 30. Now we have a chance to go up on them, and because we exchanged scores all the way through until the end, we just couldn't come up with that stop, and they ran the clock out. And 2-point conversions. We had lost
Yeah.
our kicker the week before,
Yep.
and an injury. So again, those are some parts of the game you got to work on and get those conversions.
Right.
But it was a close game. Our kids' attitude and effort, exemplary. They showed no signs of giving up,
Mhm.
and he just kept plugging away, and the opportunities presented themselves, and we're right there with them.
So, what you got Broad Perth coming up this week? What do you know about them?
Well, we've got 2 games on them as far as Scout. They played Schuylerville early. They got beat rather handily, 57-0. Then they played the next week. They played against Waterville and lost. They have yet to get on the scoreboard, but they have moved the ball consistently. They're a spread team, a 2x2, 3x1. They're basically a 50-50 run pass, so that you can expect anything and everything. They look to be like their kids are hard nosed. They play hard. Uh, Again, we'll just have to see, who
Right.
shows up for us, and I'm sure with a homecoming game and hopefully a large contingent of fans here that will bring a little extra to our young men, and we'll see how it goes. And sure, one thing for sure, we'll take the field at 7 o'clock, and whatever happens, happens.
Right. Right.
So.
Just, I know you got to get to practice here. Tight schedule today. One final question: how'd you end up coming back here to Granville? How'd that all play out?
Well, things had gone on, and unfortunately, the way things go with my previous job, it just didn't work out. And I was looking to coach, and I'll be honest with you, Keith, I'm really not ready to step away yet. I still think I can offer something to teams and programs, and I have my health and I have support of the family to be able to do that. And I had reached out to Kevin Gibo and asked him, "Do you anticipate any openings on your coaching staff?" And he had said yes. And so I said, "Well, I'm interested." And so through the process, I was hired. And I think what it comes down to is, been around a few years. I think it comes down to the point I am coming to the conclusion that I want to end where I started.
Yep.
And that's primarily what it is. And again, it saves a little bit on the travel as far as having to previously drive to either Warrensburg or Lake George or to Glens Falls. This way, when we're home practicing here, it's just down the street. And then if we get to practice in Whitehall, it's down the street and get on the bus and go with the kids, and then you're back home. So um, I want to look see if I can end it here. When and if I don't know about when and if, but whenever my body doesn't let me do it, then I'll continue to go. But
It's interesting that you bring that up because I began in the broadcasting business. And then at a certain point, I decided, well, we didn't have internet and all that back then. So there
yeah,
wasn't the opportunities there to broadcast games. And so I thought I've got to do something else in life. And I was substitute teaching and coaching. And I thought, oh, maybe this teaching thing's not so bad. Went back my late 20s, became a teacher. And now here I am full
right
circle back to the
back to where
broadcasting and,
you started from.
back to where I started full circle. So similar.
Yep, and that's the way it is. And I don't have any regrets for my career. And early on in my life, I figured out I wanted to be a coach and wanted to be a teacher, and stuck with that. And I had great coaches, great mentors. At Norwich University was Barry Minter. He was a teacher of mine. He was a football coach. He was a ski coach, and I learned so much from him. And then coming locally from the coaches in Granville, I had other people like Brent Stewart from Shenandoah Hall was another guy who I consider like a mentor. He was actually a good friend. And then Bob Ford at University of Albany. And then as time went on, you come in contact with some coaches, and coaches are always willing to share things
Right,
with you
right. No doubt about
and
it.
provide information. Anytime I would have a question, you'd ask these people, and whether you're being traveling to a clinic, going to a game, and what it comes down to is you try to give your young men every possible opportunity to be successful and give them a chance to compete.
Right,
And
right.
so far that's what our goal is. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night.
All right, excellent. We'll be here with that game live on NYVT Media Sports. I'll have the play-by-play call at 7 o'clock right here at Eppolito Field in Granville. Granville and Whitehall against Broad Alban Perth right here tomorrow night. We'll have the game live for you. Thanks, Coach
Okay,
Macura.
and thank you
For
for having me.
yeah, we just enjoyed it. Granville-Whitehall is fortunate to have you, and we'll look forward to seeing how the rest of the season goes
Okay,
here.
we'll see what happens. We'll show up.
I'll be right back with a look at the schedule for this week for all of our local teams, and we'll do that in just a little bit. This is First and 10 with Keith Harrington on NYVT Media Sports. And welcome back to First and 10 here on NYVT Media Sports. We took the show on the road this week. It worked out so well with Nathan Barber and CJ Monte's interviews last week. We decided to take the whole show on the road this week. And as you can see, we're at Granville-Whitehall football practice. And Coach Gibo and the coaching staff putting them through their paces out there as they get ready to go. They're at home tomorrow night here against Broad Alban Perth. The Patriots come into town. I don't know if Broad Alban Perth has ever come to Granville for a football game. Maybe they have some time in the past. But before I get to next week's schedule, a real good story about the last time I saw Broad Alban Perth play high school football. And it was way back in the days with the Pulteney Blue Devils when they didn't have any schools their size to play in Vermont, and they came over to play in what then I think was the Northern Adirondack League at the time. So they played, even though they were a Vermont school, they played their high school football in New York, and they made the Super Bowl. You're going to love this story. This is how far we've come with technology. Um, they played in the Super Bowl down at Cambridge, at the Cambridge football field, right where the Cambridge football field still is today. We didn't have internet. We didn't have all the fancy technology. So we did the Broad Alban Perth versus Pulteney Blue Devils Northern Adirondack League Super Bowl game. And this is how we got the game on the air. We went out and bought the longest spool of phone cord we could find, hooked it up to a phone in the press box. Judy Leach from Lakes Region Radio ran it to a house down the street from the school and hooked it into their phone. And that's how we got the game back to the radio station to be put out on the air. And I'll never forget, we gave them a thing of fresh Vermont maple syrup uh, as a thank you for letting us use their phone. That had to be at least 300 yards away from the football field. So I'll never forget that. She sat there in their kitchen and had coffee and snacks with them. Although the football game was actually, I was in the press box, but the game was actually coming over a signal that was in somebody's house at their dining room table in Cambridge, adjacent to the football fields. I'll never forget that story. And that's the last time I saw Broad Alban Perth play football until tomorrow night when they come here to take on Granville-Whitehall. And we'll have that game on the air for you. Granville-Whitehall coming in 1-1 after their loss to Fonda. And Broad Alban Perth, I believe, coming in 0-2, and they got shellacked by Schuylerville in their opener. And I think a lot of people are probably going to get shellacked by Schuylerville this year, so that probably doesn't mean all that much. But it should be an entertaining game here. We'll have it for you at 7 o'clock tomorrow night at Sam Eppolito Field right here in Granville-Whitehall against Broad Alban Perth. Also on the schedule, speaking of Schuylerville, it'll be interesting to see if they get a test. They're at home against the Hudson Blue Hawks. Hudson usually has a pretty good football team, quite a bit of athleticism and speed usually, so that'll be interesting. Hudson Falls coming off a win. They beat Rensselaer last week. They are taking on Stillwater Saratoga Catholic, as we've got some sirens going off behind, but pay no mind to that here. Hopefully everybody's okay. Warrensburg Lake George, they picked up their first win in the John Irian era last week as they defeated the Blackbirds of Voorheesville, and they will take on Rensselaer tomorrow night. Cobleskill Richmondville, the Bulldogs, went to the Class C final last year. They're off to 1-0 start. They beat Hudson Falls in their opener. They'll play Hoosick Falls Tamarack tomorrow night. Corinth, their 8-man football team, is back at it this weekend. They take on Cairo Durham, and Fairhaven will be at Fairhaven later in the season over on the Vermont side of the border. Fairhaven is taking on Mount Mansfield. That game tomorrow night over at Thomas LaPlaca Field in Fairhaven. On Saturday, huge Section 2 Class D matchup. It is Greenwich, who went to the state semifinals last year. They're 2-0. And Cambridge-Salem, who's off to a 2-0 start. It is Greenwich at Cambridge-Salem on Saturday. That's going to be a heck of a football game in Class D. And Poultney and Mill River over on the Vermont side of the border. Poultney will play over in Clarendon, Vermont at Mill River, that game on Saturday. So that's what's coming up for the schedule coming up this weekend. And once again, we will be here at Sam Eppolito Field in Granville as Granville-Whitehall will host Broad Alban Perth in our game of the week tomorrow night. We'll kick that off right here with our live stream at 7 p.m. That's going to wrap it up for this week's show. I'd like to thank Mike Macura once again for joining us on this week's show. I'd like to thank everybody that tunes in for our show every week. And don't forget, when you go watch the show or go watch one of our live football broadcasts, click the subscribe button, subscribe to NYVT Media, and you'll get notifications every time we go on and do a program. So make sure you click that subscribe button and join us on YouTube as a follower of NYVT Media and NYVT Media Sports. That's going to wrap it up here, live on location at Sam Eppolito Field in Granville. For First and 10, I'm Keith Harrington for NYVT Media Sports.